Core Set 2021. Teferi. Another Teferi. Look, Teferi's wife. Wait, Teferi's daughter? More Teferis? Teferis everywhere? Make it stop, wizards! What are you doing? Today we will cover more than just Teferi, but probably only slightly. The Core Set 2021 cards as well as Jumpstart are on the menu for today. All that and more, you're listening to the CardMisers podcast.
Welcome back, Miser Gang. Today we are nearly moved to tiers to bring you the new cards from the M21 and Jumpstart sets to evaluate which are hot and which are not. So now that the block is fired up, let's jump on in.
So first things first, as with all of these reviews, we're going to have a quick card evaluation disclaimer. So these are our evaluation of cards from the new M21 set and the Jumpstart set.
Yeah, so these are our fresh takes. We're really seeing these cards for the first time and haven't really had an opportunity to playtest anything.
Yeah, so if we get anything wrong or miss something, tell us in the comments. Please do not roast us over and over again like people have been doing to Teferi the last few years.
So we have another disclaimer about the reprints. So guys, this is a core set, and if you guys don't already know, the gist about core sets is that they reprint a lot of cards compared to other Magic sets, and in general, the power level of the set is lower than most, as well as the Jumpstart set, which has over 500 reprints. So we're only going to get to the new ones for the simplicity of time, and we already know they're in the cube formats already.
We won't talk about any cards that have been reprinted because they're already circulating in the Magic world. Some for many years and have already adapted to formats and have found their place in those respective formats. So, for example, Kira the Great Glass Spinner is being reprinted in Jumpstart, except everyone knows that is a vintage cube playable card. And if you didn't know that, a few little facts for ya. Now, getting to the cards that we think have potential in the cube format from Core Set 21, we have first Teferi, Master of Time. Now, this is, of course, Legendary Planeswalker. I can't say it.
Teferi, Master of Time.
Oh, you said the name.
Legendary Planeswalker, Teferi.
Oh, you said it again. Wait a minute, I said the name when I said the title. Okay, maybe I was faking about that. Okay, so it has the static ability of you may activate loyalty abilities of Teferi, Master of Time on any player's turn anytime you could cast an instant. If you don't know why we're laughing, you'll know in just a quick second. Its +1 is draw a card, then discard a card. Its -3 is target creature you don't control phases out. You treat it and anything attached to it as though they didn't exist until its controller's next turn. And then its -10, the ultimate, is take 2 extra turns after this one. So it's basically time stretch. It also starts at 3 loyalty, which may seem low for 4-mana planeswalkers, but you poor fool. So first off, this card is pretty cool in terms of design. I mean, being able to activate loyalty abilities on this planeswalker on your opponent's turn is something we've seen only, I think, on like one other planeswalker ultimate, and then maybe on like another effect before, like maybe like another spell.
Yeah, guess what? The last time we saw this was on a Teferi as an ultimate, and now it's just a static. It just shows you how broken this card actually is. And that's only if you're able to ultimate Teferi. That won't always happen in a game. With this Teferi, you're able to activate him on your opponent's turn right off the bat, which is an insanely powerful mechanic.
Oh yeah. Essentially, Teferi is a 5 loyalty planeswalker for 4 mana if you plus him twice, once on your turn, once on the opponent's turn. That's a great rate. So that's why we were laughing about the 3 loyalty. It doesn't matter.
Yep. Now, because of this, he does have subpar abilities, but don't get us wrong, activating him every turn is some insane value, like straight up.
Yeah, definitely. And remember that the mark of a good planeswalker is one that can protect itself as well as gain you some sort of card advantage. And this walker checks both of those boxes rather well.
Yep. The obvious card advantage of the looting effect and the phasing on opponent's creatures is great for removing creatures from combat.
And for those of you who don't remember, because the last time, again, we saw phasing was Teferi's protection, and before that, well, it was either, like, I was either not born or, barely an infant. It's a very old mechanic. Phasing does not trigger enter the battlefield abilities and thus has no downside for you. So you're not blinking your opponent's creature to remove it from combat. You're just sending it away to a, oh my gosh, phasing out is the hell of magic. It's Teferi's land. It is magic hell.
Plus, phasing means that the creature doesn't re-enter the battlefield until your opponent's next upkeep, meaning you can swing in without fear of that creature coming back with a vengeance.
Now, I think we should talk a little bit about which of our cubes we would like to include this card in and where we see it fitting in.
Yeah, we have thought long and hard about whether or not we want our souls to remain intact. Thus, we have decided that Teferi is too impure and not something we want to see in our own cubes, so don't expect to see us playing it.
In actuality, however, none of our cubes really just support what this Teferi is doing, which is just being value, so it's just not the best inclusion.
Yeah, it's just like the design is boring. But all joking aside, just because a card is good doesn't always mean that it should be shoehorned into any and all cubes.
Right you are. This card works very minimally with a card draw or control strategy, something that blue does in Legacy and Vintage, and it doesn't really work with Blink or Madness, because Madness is usually in red and black for the best results, or anything else besides. So in like a Vintage or Legacy cube, yeah, you could play it as a control piece and a card advantage piece, but it's not seeing a place in any of our cubes because it just doesn't really do anything else.
Yeah, so what we're trying to say is that, plainly, it's blah.
Yeah, Teferi this, Teferi that. Let's stop talking about all this Teferi nonsense and move on to the next card.
Yeah, this one's a lot more exciting. It's Liliana, Walker of the Dead. It's a legendary planeswalker, Liliana, with 4 loyalty, and it doesn't have any static ability like Teferi, or unlike Teferi, and its +1 says each player discards a card, period. Each opponent who can't loses 3 life. Its -3 is target creature gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your graveyard. And finally, the ultimate, which is a -7, says you get an emblem with, quote, at the beginning of combat, on your turn, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. It gains haste, end quote. Look, Liliana the Veil as a 4-mana walker. Incoming hate on this card.
Speak for yourself, you plebeian tool. I love everything about this. I mean, Liliana the Veil is a nice, fair card at 4 mana.
That is blatant propaganda. Not to say that I don't think it's a good card. This does some actual work. Draining for 3 if your opponent is hellbent is a really cool effect, and can help you close out the game as a +1 ability. But printing a worse version of Liliana the Veil, when there is so much design space...
Look, I feel you, man. And I wish we had some really cool zombie synergy or something. But let's leave that at the door of this card review, okay? Now, back to the abilities. It can protect itself, which is a pretty big deal because, as we said, a Planeswalker protecting itself is something that we personally always look out for when evaluating a Planeswalker card. However, the odds are it can't really kill anything fantastic in the early turns. I mean, it's turn 4 when you play this, so you have 3 turns to set it up so you can kill something. So that's okay, but not anything great.
Yeah. In Cube, a Planeswalker fending for itself is something, Travis and I love to see, because playing Planeswalkers, just to have them killed the very next turn, isn't especially fun, and fun is the name of the game in our cubes.
Right, and just like in real life, if you can't defend yourself the turn you are played, you'll just die. Just die.
Are you advocating for training babies to defend themselves?
I didn't mean infants, but I mean, it wouldn't hurt to give your child a 9-iron or something.
Jeez,
defense.
my child's gonna have a Glock 9 or something.
Oh
like that.
Shoot! Dang it!
That's
no.
Insane. All right, moving on from mobilizing the maternity ward. What do you think about the ultimate?
I mean, Godpharaoh's gift emblem is pretty good. I mean, it's not one of those classic ultimates that all but win the game when they go off, like Jace Unraveler of Secrets, which can counter the first spell that each opponent plays each turn. But I think it's okay.
Yeah. Nonetheless, this card can be a monetarily cheap version of Liliana the Veil if you don't have that crazy cash flow. It might even lead to some funkier gameplay rather than Liliana the Veil, and just playing a different Liliana is cool too.
Yeah, and sometimes in Cube, what you want is to make everyone happy and not have any cards that lead to widespread groans. And Liliana the Veil is definitely one of those cards that just elicits groans from people. It draws them out. You can see it with her fingers. She just draws them out.
Yo, bro. Do you know what makes me groan?
I could not care less. Spare the people and play the worst Liliana of the Veil.
For us, if we get our hands on this card, odds are it will see itself in Modern Cube. Obviously, it isn't good enough for Legacy or Vintage with our competitive style cubes, but Modern has that companion theme if you can remember, and this card could fit there just fine. I will say it detracts 1 card from empowering Gyruda, but the -3 ability is good in the Gyruda deck. And Zerda likes to play Planeswalkers too.
Oh yeah, friggin' Zerda with her walkers.
This is not time for that particular grudge. Let's move on, man.
All right, next we have Baron, Talarian, Archmage, which has the Travis Marshall stamp of favorite card of the set.
Why? Because it's blue?
No, dude, it's because it's a Man of War. Oh my gosh, wait, is that Chromatic Ori in the background? I think I just realized that. Look at the art.
Wait, it's a Chromatic Ori that's only blue.
It's a mono blue Chromatic Ori. We're doing it, guys. Okay.
Doomed.
No, we're doing it. All right, Baron Talarian Archmage is a 3 mana, 1 and 2 blue for a legendary creature, human wizard, naturally. It's a 2/2, naturally, and it says, when Baron Talarian Archmage enters the battlefield, return up to 1 target creature or planeswalker to its owner's hand. I didn't realize it said planeswalker. That's cool. You can just reset a walker. And then it also says, at the beginning of your end step, if a permanent was put into your hand from the battlefield this turn, draw a card. Oh my god, wait. You can just play it to bounce to fairy, time ravel.
Make it stop. Make it.
Oh no.
Just make it stop.
The flavor text says, there is no age at which you stop playing to fairies. Oh no. I'm done.
God, no. Don't make it stop. Oh my god, there is no age at which you stop playing Teferi?
Who would put that as a flavor text?
Of course.
Who's the artist? Ryan Pancoast.
Okay, we have to give him a break, though. He didn't design the card. Come on, he didn't design Teferi. It's not all on him, but it's partially on him because he helped with the art.
Okay, I feel like I have to make a disclaimer here that the flavor text does not actually say there is no age at which you stop playing Teferis. It says there is no age at which you stop learning.
So basically, playing Teferis.
You have to learn to stop playing Teferis.
Wait, no, you lose brain cells if you play Teferi.
I don't know. If you play Teferi, you are a heathen. I'm kidding, you're not. Please subscribe.
So, like you said, man, it's just like a Man of War that draws cards.
And
right?
That's what it would look like. Yep.
I bet this card is going to be insane in a mono blue tempo deck in Standard.
Sure. Maybe. But we do not talk about that Forsaken format. We talk about the beautiful side of Magic.
Is that Cube?
Yes. See, I was thinking Dredge, but I guess obviously I should probably say Cube there. Yeah, I mean Cube. So this card will be an all-star in competitive cubes like Modern and Legacy. Man of War is a god-tier card in Draft, and this card is that plus Gravy.
But sprinkles, remember. You say sprinkles because Gravy isn't sweet.
Right, okay, the sprinkles on this card that give you flexibility.
And flexibility is a really important thing in Magic. It allows you to tailor-make your decisions based on the circumstances of the game, and modal cards basically become different spells for different scenarios.
Scenarios, I ponder. You know, when you said Taylor, I immediately thought of Taylor Gang.
Will Smith is back.
Shut up. Being able to tempo your opponents or return a creature to your hand in the late game, perhaps with like a relevant ETB effect, and then draw a card to mitigate flood is very versatile.
So, based on that, what do you think about the mana cost?
I mean, it's not too restrictive. I wouldn't want to play this in a deck with more than like 2 colors, but not many other strategies other than Blink both work with this card and are in 3 or more colors, so I think it's fine.
Yeah. So in terms of cubes that we own and upkeep, Baron is going to see himself in many places, I think.
Oh yeah, Tribal Cube is the first stop to support wizards and humans all at once with just a classical limited all-star effect.
That's a good point. I like that. So yeah, and the next, I think, our competitive Legacy Cube might take this card. We have things like Venser, Shaper Savant, or Brazen Borrower. And, using Baron to return a Vidalian Click or Brazen Borrower and draw 1 is just good value with access mana. Otherwise, you bounce a creature and get in with something like the next card.
And that next card would be...
Ghostly Pilfer. And
oh, he's got 4 arms, dude. Oh, yeah.
Wait, no, that's not him.
Yeah, no,
that's
look.
Someone chasing him.
Oh my gosh, are you saying no, there's
it's
no
the
way.
fairy.
Oh my god, Teferi's everywhere, dude.
Dude, okay, you guys gotta look at this art. Just look at it. That's the fairy's hands right behind him. He's gonna snatch him and grab him like Mark Rosewater did.
Dude, I just realized. Remember we talked about hell being phasing? This dude's about to phase back in, and Teferi's grabbing him for round 2 in the phase world.
It's not hell though. It's not heaven either though.
It's the place in between. It's phasing. It's phasing, dude. It's just that's what it is. Hell is the graveyard. Heaven is the battlefield, and phasing is the land between those.
And that's where Teferi was born. All right, let's move on.
Nah, dude, he was born in a cesspit of gross. See, I used to love Teferi. This is the thing.
Wait.
I'm gonna take a quick digression here. We used to love Teferi. We really did. We let him into our hearts. We let him into our homes. I never let Teferi in my home. That was a lie. But he meant a lot to us.
No, for
we
real?
cared about him. We loved him. And then Hero of Dominaria. Only to be followed by Time Reveler. And then Master of Time. I can't take it.
It's okay, buddy. It's okay. Remember that one time we were on a bike ride and you're like, dude, Teferi's like probably my favorite planeswalker.
He was the second favorite. Venser's my favorite.
Yeah, he was in contention, but like we need to see Venser again. Where's Venser? Why is it only Teferi?
Bring me Venser. I was hoping for Venser.
All right, let's get on to the actual card now. So, Ghostly Pilferer is a 2-mana, 1 and a blue, for a 2/1 creature spirit rogue. Whenever Ghostly Pilferer becomes untapped, you may pay 2 generic mana. When you do, draw a card. Also, whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card. And its last ability is an activated ability, which says, discard a card. Ghostly Pilferer can't be blocked this turn. So my first impression of this card is that you could hardly ask for better facilitator for ninjutsu strategy. I know it's kind of specific in its scope of usefulness. However, if your modern or commander cube supports ninjutsu, which I may add, is a really powerful commander strategy with Yuriko Tiger Shadow. This card does a lot. I mean, just look at the text.
There are just 3 chunks of ability text on this 2-mana 2/1. Heck, there's so much text that they don't even have room for their usual flavor text of, he tried to escape, but Teferi was too strong, which is the flavor text I would add.
There should be a card called Teferi's Grasp, and it would be like designed after this card.
That'd be fun.
Also, this is just a great card for a tribal cube if you're playing spirits and can potentially draw you lots of cards over a few turns.
I agree. Spirits are one of the most complex and enjoyable tribes to play, and this card adds that much more complexity. This is the kind of card that I really, really like the Daring Saboteur kind of card. 2-drops like this just make me so happy.
Anyways, it's like they pasted the text of Key to the City on this card, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Interesting. I mean, irrelevant, but interesting.
That's definitely rude. Making this Boyo unblockable by discarding a card is just great. It can help facilitate other strategies, such as Reanimator or Hellbent strategies, like Hazoret.
Yeah, true. I mean, if you wanted to piss your hand down the drain to attack with a Hazoret, then yeah, I guess it's a great card, Jake. Good observations.
You know I didn't mean that. You always take it to the extremes. Regardless, by attacking your opponent every turn, that means you'll be untapping this Boyo every turn, allowing you to pay that 2 generic mana to draw a card, which may be something you do more often than not. You never know.
Oh yeah, it's like basically sacrificing a clue token, which is something we already do in quite a few cubes.
Oh yeah, and you know I love cracking them clues. So I'm definitely thinking we're putting this card in Modern Cube.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I can't resist a value 2-drop, and it facilitates the card draw strategy and the reanimate strategy.
I think we've spoken enough about this card. Let's move on to Discontinuity. Now this card is interesting. It is an interesting mythic. It is a 6-mana, 3 and 3 blue for an instant. Now you may be wondering, what kind of card would Jake and Travis put on their podcast that's 6 mana as an instant with such a restrictive cost? It must be insane. Well, you won't be disappointed. So, it says, as long as it's your turn, the spell costs 2 and 2 blue less to cast. Boom, there you go. Mic drop. It costs 2 mana if it's your turn.
Yeah, it's 1 on the blue.
Yeah, that's great. Everyone is probably confused right now.
Yeah.
Okay, it also says, end the turn.
That's it.
Yep, end the turn. It has 3 words in its official, what does it do? It has 3 words, end the turn. So,
if you don't know what that means,
it means end the turn. I think they get it. The turn's over.
Yeah,
done.
but
Exile all spells and abilities.
I think there's an important thing to note here, is that they include all the text that basically tells you what end the turn means.
Oh, yeah.
And they did it on purpose so they wouldn't have to put the flavor text, because this card really is showing that Teferi's not allowing you to grab his time sifter or something like that.
It's actually showing Teferi slicing off people's hands.
What?
Look at that. The fingers are cut off.
He's like a Gnat Miser. He's trying to... Oh, my God. That's like a Gnat Miser card.
Okay, anyway, so this is one of those rare and interesting effects that have interesting implications for gameplay and give rise to interesting scenarios. There was a lot of interestings. 3, actually. Personally, I love how this can be a counterspell on your turn for, 2 mana, and also just make really cool interactions, like preventing tokens that would be exiled at the end of turn. If you end the turn when the ability goes on the stack to sacrifice those tokens, let's say from Geist of St. Traft, if you just end the turn there, tokens never get exiled, and you have a 4/4 for free. Almost free. You had to pay a card for it.
Or how about 2 words? sneak attack. Plus, for 6 mana, you have a Hoser for the Eldrazi Titans. No cast triggers, nothing. There are, of course, cheaper cards that can do this ability, like Summary Dismissal. However, one has more possible uses. Ending turns also basically is Time Walk on an opponent's upkeep.
Yeah, all of the cards I've ever seen in Magic that say end the turn or take an extra turn are rares and mythic, so straight up powerful effects right here.
Yeah, but for our cubes, we're not planning on using this card. It just doesn't really fit what we're trying to do.
Yeah, but it is certainly cool as ice, so include it if you're into some funky blue interactions. If I had a mono blue cube, and if this world was a paradise, then it would be in my cube.
The next card we have is Sublime Epiphany. 6 mana, 4 in 2 blue, for an instant that says choose one or more. And it says counter target spell, counter target activated or triggered ability, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, or last but not least, target player draws a card.
It's more like and target player draws a card. So this card is excellent. As you know, I'm a sucker for modal and blue cards. Really just modal cards and blue cards, and we put those two together to create a modal blue card. Oh man, it's just so good. And for 6 mana, this card does an awful lot, like a crazy amount, way more than 6 mana ought to, and at instant speed, which is a real kicker.
Agreed. This is comparable to Commence the Endgame, drawing cards, making creature tokens, but the similarities end there. This card can additionally counter a spell and bounce a permanent all at the same time.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this were considered one of the best counterspells in the Commander format in the future. It is just that insane.
Right on. It would not be unusual to hit 3 or 4 of these options every time you cast it. And that level of consistency to this awesome effect is just a slam dunk in my opinion.
Right. You get almost a 4-for-1 and then value on top. And that's really hard to pull off for non-board wipe cards. There are very few. I think it's like Tetsamok, Primal Death, which is a really good card for 4-for-1s, but it's basically a board wipe card. There are a few cards that give you this much value for just one card, aside from like a board wipe.
Right, and since you can counter, triggered abilities, it just shuts down the Eldrazi Titans, just like the Discontinuity card. You can counter the Eldrazi Titan and counter the triggered ability.
And then copy a spell of yours, bounce a creature of theirs, and then draw a card.
That's actually disgusting.
Yeah, no, it's a great card, dude.
Yeah, this card is just really good in any control or instant/sorcery deck, or perhaps even a blink deck where you have to copy an ETB effect on your team, as well as returning your own creature or permanent to your hand to reuse.
Oh yeah, that's right. It doesn't say a permanent an opponent controls. That's really versatile. Yeah, this is the card for instant speed interaction. It literally should just say blue. 6 mana, blue. Instant, choose everything that blue loves to do. Now, where I can see this card in terms of our personal cubes is probably in Commander Cube. Trust me, I'd love to gen this into any cube I can. The only issue is that while it would be fun, and I want to cast it like a million times because it's amazing, things don't always fit the way you want them to, and the 6 mana modal spell is not what the doctor ordered for any other cube of ours, unless like we use it in like our modern cube, maybe, but even then. Next we have Mangara the Diplomat, which is a 4 mana, 3 and a white for a legendary creature human cleric. It is a 2/4 and has lifelink, as well as whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or a planeswalker you control, draw a card. It also says whenever an opponent casts their second spell each turn, draw a card.
Now, this card is an interesting little piece of white card advantage.
Look at that. I mean, you'd think the least they could do for a mythic legend is give it like 3 power, make it a nice 3/4, especially when it has lifelink. Like 2 life is 33% worse than 3. Those are bad stats right there.
Yeah. To give credit where credit is due, however, this is card advantage in the color white, which is nary unseen.
That being said, the reliability of the card advantage is the issue and the question here. That determines whether the effect is good enough for most formats, or, as I think it is, it's pretty mediocre.
And unfortunately, for everyone who likes white, it's not that good.
Simply put, this card will, in most games, simply act like a deterrent piece, a prison card, if you will.
Right. It may as well say, opponents can't attack you with more than 1 creature, and opponents can't cast more than 1 spell each turn.
That's right. You'll be doing far less card draw than you think you will with this card, and in most cases, it will just be a piece to slow down your opponents in a game. Opponents referring to Commander cubes. I doubt this card will see play like anywhere else.
Right you are. As much as I like and celebrate white card advantage, this just doesn't do the trick. The rate is really poor, and I wouldn't consider playing this in Legacy, Vintage, or Modern, where such a low impact card for 4 mana will never be good.
Yeah, I cannot see any circumstances where this card is good outside of the Commander format, maybe. Now, I can understand people wanting to play this card in many formats and finally drawing cards in white, but the truth is, nothing can fill the void where Rhystic Study should have been as a white card. Nothing can fix that. And when you grasp at any apparent card draw they do print for white, it doesn't change the past. You have to let go. It's only hurting you more. And me. It's hurting us both. Just let go.
That was thoroughly depressing. Like, really depressing. Let's talk about the next dragon card instead. It will cheer you up.
Oh, wait. We have to say if it's going into our cubes or not.
I thought that was an obvious no. White draws a reasonable number of cards with artifacts or Donna Hopes or Mentor of the Meeks or any number of artifacts. We don't play Prison and thus don't need this card at all.
Amen. Sorry, I gotta dry my eyes. You read the next one.
So next up we have a dragon card, which I'm a huge fan of, and it's called Terror of the Peaks. It's a 5 mana, 3 and 2 red for a creature dragon. It's a 5/4, and it has flying, and it also says spells your opponents cast that target Terror of the Peaks cost an additional 3 life to cast. Well, also, whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Terror of the Peaks deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target.
So I actually played against this in a draft when I first drafted M21, and it was pretty good.
I imagine.
Yeah, so I'd actually first picked that blue counterspell, the mode spell that we talked about earlier, the 6 mana one.
That's fascinating. Irrelevant, though. Let's move on.
All right. Right. So for this card, my feelings. Our first impressions are that it deserves its mythic status, for sure, more than any other card in the entire set, with perhaps the exception of Massacre Worm. But that's because it's Massacre Worm. Oh boy, that card just gives me the chills.
Wait. We're going to say that Teferi doesn't deserve Mythic?
He doesn't deserve anything. He didn't deserve to be printed.
Wait, he deserves... No, yeah, he deserves a lighter and gasoline.
Yeah, he does. He deserves to be burned down with the companions like we talked about last episode.
So, 5 mana for a 5/4 dragon is an awesome rate. I don't think it's as good as a Glorybringer, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, the thing with Old Glory Bee is that it has an immediate impact with damage and removal, and you can just blast their creature and hit for 4, all on the turn it is cast. Something that is really important in aggro decks, so I definitely think that Glory Bee is better than this, but it's interesting because they have really different effects.
However, this card is straight dummy, and slots right into our modern cube, and we'll probably see a lot of play in cubes in general.
Oh yeah, talk about a mythic card. This thing is pushed to see play in a lot of Magic formats.
Definitely. Imagine resolving a Desolation Twin with this boyo out. Automatic 20 damage to the dome. Also, like, the ability on Terror of the Peaks is literally a Warstorm Surge stapled onto him, and that's a 6 mana enchantment. And he's only 5 mana. So, like, I could see this card clawing out a spot in Vintage or Legacy Cube build. The only issue is that Glorybringer kind of reigns supreme over that spot, like we said, in the cube list. So it may have a hard time, slotting in.
Yeah, I really think that Glorybringer is the main opponent to this card. Like, that's literally the same. It's 5 mana. It's 4/4, 5/4. And it's just that Glorybringer is just a little bit better, I think. But in our modern cube, however, where we build around the companion mechanic, this card is a super bomb.
Obosh the Brave Piercer. He's straight up ridiculous with this dragon. It's an odd CMC card, so Obosh can play it, and play it should. Not only does it give you a 10/4 dragon with flying, but all the damage dealt from creatures you control entering the battlefield is doubled as well.
Oh yeah, when Magic players talk about a game closer, this is the kind of card they're referring to. Definitely pick one of these up for cube, or if you have an Obosh deck. This is just straight up deck building advice. Put this in Obosh. It is that good in there, and it basically just looks tailor made for it. I mean, it's an odd CMC card, and then it itself deals the damage to the opponent. Let's move on to the next card, which is Fiery Emancipation. This is a 6 mana, 3 and 3 red for an enchantment. I know, weird to see an enchantment on this list here, but it says if a source you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals triple that damage to that permanent or player instead. Wow.
Hello again, this is CardMisers here with yet again another spell that does floods of damage to, well, really anywhere you desire. To the Dome, check. To a big Eldrazi, check. To an annoying Teferi, check. Check. Infinite turns, check.
Like Terror of the Peaks wasn't enough damage to throw around in this set. This card triples your bolts in any source of damage, which is really critical for the Commander format because your life totals are doubled, which traditionally means that playing a burn strategy and trying to kill your opponent really quickly with lightning bolts and other burn cards, shocks, etc., is really bad because they're half as good. But now, if you have this enchantment out, they are about 1.5 times as good. That's good.
Talk about a fun cube card. I'll be happy to play this in Commander Cube any day.
And you can find a way to cheat. If you can find a way to beat this card, good luck. And if you can find a way to cheat this card out, early, you are just sure to win the game. It even works with every source of damage that you control. So any of your creatures, any of your spells, anything that deals damage, this will triple that stuff up.
Gross. Essentially, tripling your creatures' damage is some busted power.
Yeah. And this means that this enchantment actually affects the board the turn that you play it, which is something a lot of enchantments don't do the turn you play them, as long as, you have creatures on the board, that is.
Right. Unlike with Bounty to Luxa, which is a card that triggers during your upkeep, this 6-mana enchantment can affect things right away. Not saying that Bounty to Luxa is a bad card, but you do have to wait for your upkeep for it to do work.
Yeah, to put this card into perspective, if you're playing a Shaman of the Grey on turn 4 and a Glorybringer on turn 5 and then fire Emancipation on turn 6, you could potentially swing at your opponents for 24 damage because it triples your creature's power, essentially, and you could deal 12 damage to one of your opponent's creatures if you exert Glorybringer.
Or you could cast a 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, 2 2-drops, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop, and then this card, and deal literally lethal. I figured while we're making wild potential scenarios, I'd make one that actually results in victory.
I do not like your tone there, young man.
Yeah. Let's move on to the next card after hearing that Massacre. Worm. Next up, we have Elder Gargaroth. It is a 5-mana, 3 and 2 green, for a 6/6 creature beast. It has Vigilance, Reach, and Trample, and it says whenever Elder Gargaroth attacks or blocks, choose 1. First option, you create a 3/3 beast creature token. Second option, you gain 3 life, and last but not least, draw a card.
Look, it's Untamed Kavu all grown up. Oh, so proud.
Or it's his massive grandpappy that happens to be The Rock or Dwayne Johnson in the Magic world.
Not gonna lie, I really didn't get that joke. I don't know what you mean.
This big beast really is a huge unit in terms of creatures. A 6/6 for 5 is an amazing rate already, and then tacking on 3 keywords that help the triggered ability of this card is just absurd.
Yeah, the fact that this big boy even has a triggered ability is super nice. It helps token strategies by making 3/3 beasts. It helps life gain strategies by gaining 3 life. Or drawing a card helps fuel your hand to make sure that you're playing spells every turn.
Definitely. It does a few things that help out different strategies, which is something to look for in a good cube card because every slot matters in a cube. And if one card can help 3 strategies rather than just 1, you should definitely consider it.
Oh yeah, and the Vigilance on this card is a huge plus since you can attack and block with a big body and trigger him potentially every turn.
That keyword takes the prize on this card and pushes it to the mythic power level. If it didn't have Vigilance, I'm not so sure it would be a mythic or nearly as good as it is with Vigilance.
Yeah, but don't forget the trample too. I mean, Reach feels like it was just pasted on there for flavor or for a power push or whatever. But a classic problem of huge stompy dudes like this is that they can just be chump blocked for days. But trample gets around that. Trample is really good here.
Right. And, plus you gain inevitability by making a 3/3 on each of your turns at least. This is a must kill for your opponent or they're just dead.
100% correct. I plan to see this card in many cubes. Not because it's a good beater and defender, but like we said before, because it helps facilitate a few different strategies at once. Also, the keywords and the size of this elder brother is nice as well.
Amazing top-end creature for almost any cube, especially if your cube is light on removal or based around creatures.
Right on. All right, on to the next one. We have Idol of Endurance. Now, this is a 3-mana, 2 and a white for an artifact. It says, when Idol of Endurance enters the battlefield, exile all creature cards with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard until Idol of Endurance leaves the battlefield, meaning that when it leaves, all those go back to the graveyard. They don't stay in exile. Next, it has an activated ability, 1 and a white for tap. Until end of turn, you may cast a creature spell from among the cards exiled with Idol of Endurance without paying its mana cost. Now, disclaimer for this card, before we hype you up with all the positives, it is an expensive artifact at 3 mana in terms of the deck that's going to be played in, and it only allows you to cast 1 card exiled with it per turn. So it has its limits.
That being said, it allows you to cast the creature without paying its mana cost immediately if you have the 2 mana for activation.
And while you won't realistically get more than 3 activations of this card in a game, White Weenie and Sacrifice strategies only care about having raw bodies on the battlefield, and that's what this card can do.
Another potential direction for this card, I think the only direction that sees in a cube outside of Commander is using it with combo pieces.
Right, something like the Vizier of Remedies or Hermit Druid combo. Not really or, it's more like Vizier of Remedies and Hermit Druid combo. It's an interesting way to abuse this card, though. I agree.
Yeah. And with graveyard tutors like Buried Alive, Entomb, or Gerard's Orders, you can stock your graveyard with the right pieces of the combo of your choice and cast them at instant speed on your opponent's end step.
Which is important for combo, as you don't want your opponent interfering with it.
So, personally for us, this card might slot into our Oathbreaker cube, which has cards like Sorin, Vengeful Bloodlord, and a potent sacrifice strategy.
Other than that, though, I am not interested. But the next card is fun.
Conspicuous Snoop. It's a 2 mana, 2 red, for a 2/2 creature, Goblin Rogue. It says, play with the top card of your library revealed, and you may cast goblin spells from the top of your library. Also, as long as the top card of your library is a goblin card, Conspicuous Snoop has all activated abilities of that card.
Snoop, Snoop, Conspicuous Snoop.
Goblin Rogue!
I didn't know what we were setting up there for a second. Alright, this card is not meant for anything other than a tribal cube with a goblin strategy, particularly a goblin strategy with Kiki and Siege Gang Lieutenant or Mob Flunkies for an infinite damage combo. That is what we like to see.
Well, that was oddly specific. You know, he's right though. If there's no goblins, Snoopy is no good.
But in a tribal cube, this thing is straight bonkers with other goblins. I'm talking straight value.
Snoopy the dog or Snoop Dogg, you know, whatever you want. It is a experimental frenzy for goblins and provides the aggro deck because goblins is always an aggressive strategy, literally every time, with some much needed card advantage.
Plus, any activated abilities on your goblin roster, just best friends with the Snoop. Alright, next we have Subira Tulzidi Caravaner. Now this is a 3 mana, 2 and a red for a 2/3 legendary creature human shaman. It has haste, oh, that's not bad, and it says 1 generic mana, activated ability, 1 mana, another target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. And then it has another activated ability, 1 in a red, tap, discard your hand until end of turn. Whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less deals combat damage to a player, draw a card.
Is this Teferi's daughter?
I think so. Based on my skills of deduction, it would make the most sense.
Well, how do you figure?
It's elementary, my dear Watson. Simply consider. First, youthful face, barely any wrinkles. Can't be older or near Teferi's age. Perhaps he likes them young? Unlikely. He's a millennium old. He's too wise to have the patience for youth. Second, observe the fashion. This is no matronly garb. This is the dress of a rebellious teen. Rebellious, you say? How can you be so sure? Simple. Observe the colors of the card. Red, the color of emotion, passion, recklessness. Recall Teferi. Recall the other card related to Teferi. Both are Azorius. Blue, white, standing for wisdom, control, thoughtfulness. Anything other than the brashness of youth and rebellion. Conclusion. Subira the Caravaner is a nomadic youngster who rebelled from her parents and their desire to see her in the Talarian Academy to become a mage. She didn't like that. No, she wanted freedom. She donned the nomadic garb, took on the mantle of the red color philosophy, and ran away from home. She hasn't seen her father for many years.
Wow. That's a lot.
Was I right?
I'm not sure. You know, it does sound like a sorry wizard's woodprint, though.
True. True, my dear Watson, true. The investigation goes on. The mystery unsolved.
Let's move on to the next card, which is Pack Leader. This card is a 2 mana, 1 and a white for a 2/2 creature dog.
It's a dog? Is that in the backyard? Wait, where are the dogs at?
The backyard, where the dog's at.
In the backyard where the dog's at. In the front yard where the hog at.
Where the hog's at. But more importantly, the backyard where the dog's at. Also, it gives all other dogs in the backyard get +1/+1. And whenever Pack Leader attacks, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn to dogs you control. Because, you know, obviously they're trying to get out of the backyard. Pack Leader prevents all the damage that would happen to them, like the shock collars.
Oh my gosh, dude. You are just really going in depth on this little Wayne lyric. For those who didn't know, what we were quoting about Dogs in the backyard. That was a Lil Wayne lyric. Jake just took it to the next level. So for this card, Mr. Pack Leader, we were only mentioning it because of what it means for tribes in Magic. It's not necessarily a particularly great card, but what it means. It's important.
That's right. From now on, dogs are an official tribe in Magic. This is obviously good news.
Yep, now almost all hound creatures have been retconned into dogs, and you can build dog tribal to your heart's content.
Not that necessarily you should. It isn't well supported yet. There isn't critical mass of doggos.
That's true, so don't just throw this tribe into your tribal cube and expect it to be good. It doesn't have the legs to stand on just yet. Next we have Vito, Thorn of the Dusk Rose, which is a 3-mana, 2 and a black, for a legendary creature, Vampire Cleric. I almost called it a human too. I am struggling today. It is a 1/3, and it says whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. It has an activated ability for 3 and 2 black. Creatures you control gain lifelink until end of turn. And its flavor text says, through the blood of the wicked, shall be redeemed. Let us pray.
All right, so first off, talk about goth, bro. The flavor text is as goth as gets. A bit scary, but cool if you're into that sort of thing.
Who do you know that is into that sort of thing? Personally, I'm more interested in the art of this card. It looks like something from Assassin's Creed, as if Ezio turned into a vamp and started a cult.
You realize the assassins were already a cult.
Dude, I don't devote my time to Assassin's Creed lore.
No, but you devoted it to get 100% completion in an Assassin's Creed game.
Interesting idea.
But, interesting idea. Let's get onto actually talking about the power level of this card.
Well, it's Sanguine Bond on a stick and 2 less mana, which is, that's actually kind of crazy.
Yeah, this ability is pretty scary for 3 mana and is a combo kill with Revenge from the split card Revival Revenge.
Oh, wow, I didn't even think about that combo. That's pretty cool. Yeah, like 9 mana, lose the game. I mean, it's a bit much, but it can be spread out over 2 turns, which could be good in terms of mana availability, but maybe not so good in terms of, giving your opponent time to deal with it. So, mediocre combo.
Yeah, in terms of cube, I can see this being played wherever life gain strategies abound. I wouldn't dream of seeing it in any official Wizards cube list because it isn't one of those solitarily good cards like Elder Gargaroth, but it has the potential to be super synergistic in the life gain deck.
Yeah, consider this for Modern Cube if it supports heavy life gain. Otherwise, Commander Cube is the likeliest place if you play like Oloro and stuff like that.
Ooh, yes. Next up, we have Garuks Uprising. It's a 3-mana, 2 and a green for an enchantment. It says, when Garuks Uprising enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw a card. It also says, creatures you control have trample. And it also says, whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card.
I have little to say about this card. It's a common effect that we've seen for card advantage in the big green decks.
Right on. It's just a straight upgrade on Kavu Lair, allowing you to draw a card when it enters, which means it isn't always a do-nothing enchantment when played.
Yeah, and for Cube, consider putting this in as a replacement for Elemental Bond. I mean, the difference between 3 and 4 power is sometimes really big, like Garruk Planeswalkers will no longer trigger it, but Trample is a huge keyword ability to be given to all your creatures, so, try to weigh the balance and see if the green cards in your cube are more likely to have 4 power or 3 power and decide whether Elemental Bond or this card are better.
Right, so at that point, what's the trade-off? Next up,
we have Basiri's Lieutenant, which is a 4-mana, 3 and a white for a 3/4 creature human knight. It has vigilance and protection from multicolored. It says, when Basiri's Lieutenant enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And then when Basiri's Lieutenant or another creature you control dies, if you add a +1/+1 counter on it, create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance.
Well, since Basiri didn't contribute much to the cube format, at least his Lieutenant makes an appearance to pick up his slack.
I think it's actually pronounced Basri. Is it Basri?
He doesn't deserve any respect.
Yeah, I'm a bit underwhelmed with Basiri, but we're not here to talk about him, rather his lieutenant.
Yeah, what stands out to me is the stats of this boyo. A 4-mana, 3/4 with vigilance and protection from multicolored is great. And that's not even considering that he could potentially be a 4/5 if you choose to put the counter on him.
Yep, and if you choose to put the counter on him, that guarantees you a 2/2 token unless he gets exiled. Which, they're unlikely to waste an exile removal on this card.
Oh yeah, plus he helps out the counter strategies. If you find that you have a theme of +1/+1 counters in your cube, this card can be big for that strategy by ensuring that if your creatures with +1/+1 counters on them die, you do get some tokens.
Right, and it goes hand in hand with token strategies too, assuming you get some triggers off of him.
Now, in our Commander Cube and Tribal Cubes, Humans and encounters are big strategies, so this card is going to be included in there as a two-way support piece. Personally, I cannot wait.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. Now we're going to move on to the next card, which is
Ren and Ciri, Inseparable. It is a 4 mana, 1 in Naya color, so red, green, white, for a 4/4 legendary creature, dog, cat. That is a new thing. A dog cat. And it says...
backyard with a dog cat.
Ooh. Gross, but yeah. Whenever you cast a dog spell, create a 1/1 green cat creature token. Kind of weird. Whenever you cast a cat spell, create a 1/1 white dog creature token. That doesn't seem right to me. But, nonetheless. And it also has an activated ability that costs a Naya, a red, green, and a white, and you have to tap it. And it says Ren and Ciri, Inseparable. Deals damage to any target equal to the number of dogs you control. You gain life equal to the number of cats you control.
So basically, cool Naya tribal commander for cats and dogs if you want a pets deck in your commander cube. Otherwise, don't play it.
Yeah, the only thing cool about this card that I see is that if you just control like 1,000,000 dogs, you just like tap it to deal it to your opponent and you just win off commander damage. But like other than that, eh.
Right. Next we have Niambi, Esteemed Speaker, which is a 2 mana, white, blue, for a legendary creature, human cleric. It's a 2/1, and it has flash. And then it says, when Niambi, Esteemed Speaker, enters the battlefield, you may return another target creature you control to its owner's hand. If you do, you gain life equal to that creature's converted mana cost. It also has an activated ability for 1, a white and a blue. Tap it, discard a legendary card, draw 2 cards.
This is definitely Teferi's wife.
Yeah, upon closer inspection of the card, you can see the wrinkles in the lion's inner face.
Plus, old ladies bob their hair short. Young women do not.
Case closed, I think.
What I like is the story implications of the activated ability. She can throw access legends out of her life and draw 2 cards instead.
She just kicks Teferi out of the house and then gains knowledge because of it.
Screw you, Teferi. Next up, we have Brash Haunter, which is a 5 mana for a 4 and a red, a 1/1 creature goblin. It has Indestructible, and whenever Brash Haunter is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. It also has an activated ability, which costs 2 and a red. You have to tap it, and it says Brash Haunter fights another target creature.
It also has the flavor text of, you hit like a Teferi, which means to say, like a friggin' truck. I'm kidding, it actually says you hit like a kobold. So anyways, first impressions of this card, very interesting. This is an effect that we've seen before on cards like Stuffy Doll, and then let's see, Boros Reckoner. Anyways, we've seen this sort of effect before. However, what we haven't seen is the ability 2 in a red, tap, have it fight another target creature. That allows this Brash Haunter to actually have an offensive capability to be dealing damage directly to your opponent's face by fighting creatures. I mean, first off, I have seen this card deal 20 damage to an opponent in a game. Like in M21 draft, I've seen it deal 20 damage to an opponent in a game. It is way better than you think.
While you may consider 5 mana to be a big obstacle for this card, it really isn't so bad.
Yeah, and then there are plenty of other ways to abuse this card and the effect that it has. Like, for example, if you want to give it Infect with cards like Grafted Exoskeleton or Tainted Strike, you can just have it block a creature, get Infect, have it be dealt damage from that creature, deal that damage directly to an opponent, and then 3 mana tap it to then fight the creature. And let's say the creature had 5 or more power, then boom, you just killed a player with 10 Infect. That is awesome. That is so cool.
Yeah, the big thing with this card, the reason why it separates itself from cards like Boros Reckoner is because it has Indestructible. That's a huge plus for this card. It just doesn't die to combat damage. And that's what makes the second ability of the card so good too. You can literally have it fight like a Desolation Twin or a big Eldrazi and it just won't die. Even though it's a 1/1, it just won't die. And it will just dome them for a bunch of damage. You can equip Basilisk Collar on it to give it Death Touch.
And lifelink.
And lifelink, yeah.
Oh yeah, lifelink with this card. Whew.
All right, yeah, so this card just strikes me as a casual cube card or, a commander cube card.
Yeah, definitely for sure. Now let's move on to the next one, which is Spark Hunter Masticore. It is a 3 mana artifact creature Masticore. It is a 3/4, and as an additional cost to cast the spell, discard a card. It has protection from planeswalkers, something I don't believe we've seen before, and has an activated ability for 1 generic mana. Spark Hunter Masticore deals 1 damage to target planeswalker. It also has another activated ability of 3 mana. Spark Hunter Masticore gains Indestructible until end of turn. What's it with these lions that gain indestructible? You've got Fleece Mane Lion, Bronze-Hide Lion, and then this Masticore boy, Spark Hunter Masticore.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but I don't know. I'm not like super high on this card because like when you play it, you have to discard a card like right away, so you're automatically down a card. The protection from Planeswalkers is really big, but say you're not playing against like any Planeswalkers, like what does it do then? Like not too much.
This strikes me as one of those hoser cards that are usually really important to put into a cube. So, for example, in our Commander cube, we have certain hosers against what? We have certain hosers for artifacts. We have hosers for humans. No, for zombies. We have hosers for zombies, and we have hosers for, a couple other strategies that just are so good against that strategy, and we have just one card. So like Vandal Blast against artifacts. That is the supreme hoser for an artifact deck. And then we have Angel of Glory's Rise against zombies, and so what these cards do is that they just serve as hosers that you get, once in a blue moon, you happen to be a player who has that in your sideboard and you play against the right deck. And you just have this really good sideboard piece. And those are sometimes really important for preventing strategies that would normally be really busted from being, that extra tiny bit better. If you catch my meaning.
Right, and say your cube just has like a ton of Planeswalkers and, people play them all the time in your cube. This card might be a good addition to it. And like this card in an Oathbreaker cube.
Oh yeah, MVP.
It's so good because like every general or like commander in that cube is a Planeswalker, so you're just guaranteed to see one every game. So this card honestly might be like pack one, pick one in that cube. It's that good.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
It has also the potential to be very bad. So just be wary and kind of assess this card based on what your cube has in it and, like how many Planeswalkers you normally see.
Yeah, I agree with that. Let's move on to the next card, which is
Chandras Incinerator. It is 6 mana for 5 and a red for a 6/6 creature elemental. It says this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total amount of non-combat damage dealt to your opponents this turn. It has trample, and it also says whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, Chandras Incinerator deals that much damage to target creature or planeswalker that player controls.
This card is really good. I think this card is great for Elder formats like Legacy and Vintage, as well as Modern. I mean, it's just non-combat damage. If Mono Red is playing, bolts and Rift Bolts and all the other kinds of bolts, screw the critics, you might as well play this because it'll allow you to, turn. Basically, I think what's really great about this card is that not only will it be a really cheap, really powerful threat, a 6/6 trampler, but when you cast your bolts at your opponent, usually a trade-off is that you don't get to kill your opponent's creatures with them. But this card fixes that by allowing you to bolt your opponent and then bolt their creature.
Right, so turn 1, you could suspend a Rift Bolt, and then turn 2, that Rift Bolt goes off, you hit them in the face, you Lightning Bolt their face, and you play this card for 1 mana. A 6/6 Trampler for 1 mana. Tell me, what would you have on turn 2?
Probably a Signet.
Yeah, exactly. So would you rather have your opponent be at 14 in a Vintage Cube with a 6/6 Trampler out, or would you have like a Dimir Signet?
I play Storm, so I'd rather have the Signet, but I see your point there. Now, that's sort of like the absolute dream scenario, but even if you manage to cast this for 4 mana, even 5 mana as a 6/6 Trampler, and that's like it at its worst, it's still just a great card to have, and the possibility of having it super early is great. And I don't really think about this card as that great for Commander,
No, I don't think so. Just like the fact that Commander Cube doesn't really play that much like deal damage to your face spells, it just makes this card a little bit worse. Yeah, you're just not going to play it for like cheaper than what it already costs. And by that time, you're going to see creatures on the battlefield that are just like bigger than this or, at the same power level. So at that point, you're just playing like a vanilla 6/6 Trampler with the ability tacked onto it.
Yeah, 6/6 vanillas aren't really that great in Commander Cube.
All right, let's move on to the next card,
which is Chromatic Ori. It is a 7 mana artifact, legendary artifact, and it says you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. Oh, Chromatic Lantern. Interesting. It also taps to add 5 colorless mana. And then it says 5 generic mana, tap it to draw a card for each color among permanents you control.
I like that when you tap it for 5 generic colorless mana, it actually is mana of any color.
Yeah.
And you don't have to decide what that mana is right away.
Well, if it was 5 colorless mana, it'd be horrible.
Right. So, as you can kind of tell, guys, Travis and I aren't that huge on this card.
Oh, I dislike this card greatly. It is my least favorite card from this entire set.
Yeah, see, I like this card, but Travis has convinced me to be a little bit, hesitant to include it in any cubes. 7 mana is a lot. 7 mana is just a lot.
Yeah, and tapping for 5 is all well and dandy, but, just like the Thran Dynamo or Gilded Lotus problem, when you cast a big mana rock and then it gets destroyed, it feels so bad. But also, what rubs me the wrong way about this card, and it may be just me being petty, is that it feels like Wizards of the Coast thought this was a slam dunk commander card. I feel like when they were designing it, they were like, oh my god, we're going to put in everything that commander players like. We're going to put in mana fixing. We're going to put in mana ramp. And then we're going to put in card draw. It's just going to be amazing. 5 colors are going to love this. And I just hate it. I just hate it.
Yeah, the thing to me were like, sure, it's like Chromatic Lantern. You can add, spend mana as though it were any mana of any color. And it does tap for 5 mana. But also, to use that last ability, you have to pay 5 mana, tap it, so you can't use that 5 mana that you tap it for, so you have to have 5 other mana just to tap this, to draw a card for each color among permanents you control. And oftentimes, that's going to be like, 1, 2, or 3. Very rarely, you're going to have, 4 cards or 5 cards drawn off this thing. So, at that, you're like spending so much mana to draw like 1 to 2 cards, so maybe 3 if you're lucky.
Yeah. In comparison, like this compared to something like Zendikar Resurgent or Cyclonic Rift, or I know it costs 1 more mana, but Ugin the Spirit Dragon, there's just no contest here. All those cards are just so much better than this, and they do so much more.
Yeah, so you won't really see us putting this card in any of our cubes. We might try it out, and by I mean I might try it out for a little bit and then be like, nah. But yeah, the only thing that we really like about this card is the art. The art is sick.
Yeah, the art is pretty good. I will give it that. All right, next.
The next card we have is Rada, Heart of the Keld. This is a 3 mana, 1, a red, and a green, for a 3/3 legendary creature, Elf Warrior. As long as it's your turn, Rada, Heart of Keld, has first strike. You may look at the top card of your library anytime, and you may play lands from the top of your library. Wow. It also has an activated ability that costs 6 mana for a red and a green, and it says Rada gets +X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control.
So this is, I think, definitely the best iteration of Rada that we've seen. We've seen Rada, Heir of the Keld, and then we've seen another Rada that's just 2 mana and taps for mana.
Like Grand Warlord Rada.
Yeah, Grand Warlord Rada.
This being a 3 mana 3/3 that has first strike on your turn is already like good stats.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's just solid. It's makes the vanilla test, and then it has a really great keyword ability, which means it won't be blocked for at least a couple of turns.
Yeah, and that's not even like the good part about this card. The good part about this card is that it has the Courser of Krufix ability.
/ Verge Rangers now.
Exactly. You can get that card advantage by playing lands off the top of your library, and that's pretty critical in aggro decks.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, playing lands from the top of your library is card draw. It is. You are taking that card and putting it onto the battlefield, whereas it would have normally gone into your hand. So it's like you've drawn it and then played it. So it basically just has card draw on it. That's what made Courser of Krufix so good, and that's what makes Rada, Heart of Keld, excellent.
Actually about this card that I just realized is that unlike Courser of Krufix, you don't have to reveal the top card of your library. You can just look at it at any time, so you don't give that information to your opponents.
That is a really good point. That it is. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's actually really big.
Yeah, it may not seem big, but not giving that information to your opponents, they don't know what's on top of your deck.
Yeah.
You could, swing in for combat, and then they have no idea what's on top of there. And then, second main phase, you could just play the land off the top if it's a land.
Yeah, and also they know what you have drawn in the past few turns if you have to reveal it. And so they can easily sculpt what they're doing around what you've drawn, but this doesn't do that. What I also like about this Rada, and what I think will make it viable for Commander Cube as a good commander, is that the activated ability of basically Blackblade Reforged, giving it +X until end of turn, where X is the number of lands you control, it makes it relevant in the late game. So a lot of what happens with cheap commanders or just cheap cards in general is that they get outstripped as you get to the late game. As you're casting Terracodons and Zakamas as 9/9s. The cards, a 3/3 first strike does nothing against that. Literally nothing. But the activated ability allows Rada to just keep up, basically, with all of these extremely big, bomby cards. So, literally, if you attack with Rada and they've got a Zakama, they will not block because if you have 6 mana, obviously, so you can activate this activate ability and just make it a 9. The fact that she can beat up Zakama just makes me smile.
Yeah, and playing lands at the top of your library does actually fuel the activated ability part of the card. It gives you the lands that you need to pump the card to make it huge. Also, it kind of like incentivizes your opponent to not block it because their creature could just die if you activate the ability. And if you give this creature any evasion, like Whisper Silk Cloak or Trample, you could potentially just like kill them. Now that we're done with the core 2021 cards, we're going to move on to the Jumpstart cards. These are some pretty cool cards, so stay tuned, guys.
Next card that we have is Tiny Bones Trinket Thief, which will take the top spot for my favorite card of tonight. Tiny Bones Trinket Thief is 1 in a black for a 1/2 legendary creature skeleton rogue. It says at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent discarded a card this turn, you draw a card and lose 1 life. And then it has an activated ability, 4 in 2 black, so 6 mana. Each opponent with no cards in hand loses 10 life.
Yeah, dude, Tiny Bones is like, this guy's crazy. And if you guys have noticed any of the lore on him that Wizards actually released, they tell us that Tiny Bones doesn't actually want to steal. He just does it because he has to for his family. That makes him like just even cuter.
Oh yeah, he's trying to support his family by little tiny bones stealing little tiny things.
I could potentially see this guy in vintage or legacy cubes because he turns your discard spells like Thoughtseize, Inquisition of Kozilek, and like even Duress into like you choose a card from your opponent's hand and make them discard it, and then you draw a card and lose a life at the beginning of your end step. So it turns those cards just into like cyclers almost with the same ability that they already do.
Yeah, like cantrips. Yeah, this card is just great. Building around him in, having a discard strategy going on in literally any format, legacy, vintage, modern, commander, any of those formats, building around him, I think will be really powerful. The fact that he is a 2 mana card means that he is, viable even in vintage. And then the fact that, again, he just turns all of your discard spells into cantrips to then get more discard spells, and I think that's great. The unfortunate bit, though, is that at the beginning of each end step, if an opponent discarded a card this turn, you draw a card and lose 1 life, which means that once your opponent gets hellbent, you are unlikely to get any value for the rest of the game.
Right, but when your opponents, don't have any cards left in their hands, and you're just not drawing any cards off of his first ability, his second ability, the 6 mana, 4 and 2 black, each opponent with no cards in hand loses 10 life. That pretty much says the first ability is for the early game, the second ability is for the late game. That's really potent.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, in all these other formats aside from Commander, your starting life total is 20. This little guy, this little tiny bones, will pay 6 mana to just drain you of half your life if you don't have cards in hand. So what's normally really bad about cards that have to do with discarding, for example, something like Raider's Wake, is that you can only discard so much. Your opponent's not going to sandbag a bunch of cards in their hand into the late game just to let you discard them. So you really have to have something that really pays you off for your opponent having no cards in hand. Sort of like Davriel pays you off by dealing 2 damage to the opponent, and then the new Liliana will pay you off by making them lose 3 life. This Tiny Bones can, essentially drain them for 10 if they are hellbent. So that's really awesome.
The next one is Allosaurus Shepherd. It's just 1 green for a 1/1 creature elf shaman. It says, Allosaurus Shepherd can't be countered. Green spells you control can't be countered. It also has a 6 mana ability for 4 and 2 green, and it says, until end of turn, each elf creature you control has base power and toughness 5/5 and becomes a dinosaur in addition to its other types.
So, speaking very plainly here, this is clearly a really awesome Elves tribal card. Only really going to see play in Elves tribal.
Yeah, if you have a tribal cube that supports elves, it's a great card to put in, but anywhere else, maybe if your modern cube has a lot of elves in it, maybe it's good. I don't even know, though.
Yeah, I mean, modern has a good elves combo sort of thing going on there, so maybe.
Yeah, it's just kind of
legacy.
Yeah, it's definitely just weird to me that this thing isn't legendary.
Mm-hmm.
Just that
yeah,
it just seems like it should be.
It does so much that it feels like it should. Yeah. Well, with this card, we're definitely, if we get our hands on it, we're definitely going to think about putting this into our tribal cube, where elves are a big thing. And it's actually funny because what you find in strategies like elves, where you play a bunch of little mana dorks and then more mana dorks, and just basically create a bunch of mana to then cast a bunch of more elves, and then have things like Beast Whisperer and a few other elves that let you draw cards when you cast elves, to just basically steamroll through your deck, cast a bunch of elves. Then what you're stuck with is just a bunch of random miscellaneous like 1/1 or 2/2 elves. And what you need is a card like Allosaurus Shepherd to pay 6 mana to give them an overrun effect, to make them 5/5 dinosaurs. Oh, which I will add, actually, that text right there also slightly synergizes with the dinosaur tribe in our cube.
Oh, yeah.
Elves and dinosaurs together.
You know what? If you have in your tribal cube elves as like the green creature type, and then dinosaurs as like a red or white in your cube, you could potentially do like elves and dinosaurs commuting together. And that's kind of interesting. I mean, like, you could have some tribal synergies with both.
I mean, they'd all hinge on this one card in the 360 cards of Cube, but...
Right, so it's really niche, but, you know, something cool to think about.
But yeah, so this card's going there, and other than that, though, we don't play Elves in Legacy because we're not of inferior mind. Next, we have Maxis, the Goblin Grandee, which I thought it said Goblin Grenade, and so I thought they were, like, having him in this throne to, like, throw him. Goblin Grenade.
He's chucking all those goblins, and they're just exploding on impact.
So we have a 6-mana Goblin, which I think is the first time I've ever seen a Goblin over 5 mana, and it's a legendary creature, Goblin Noble. It's a 4/4, and it says, when Maxis, Goblin Grandee, enters the battlefield, reveal the top 6 cards of your library, put all Goblin creature cards with a converted mana cost 5 or less from among them onto the battlefield, and the rest onto the bottom of your library in a random order. And then it says, whenever Maxis attacks, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each other Goblin you control. I think this card would be good if it had haste.
Yeah, if it had haste, I definitely think it would be a lot better.
Well, obviously it'd be a lot better because it has haste, but I mean, like, the playability of this card. Do you think it needs haste to be playable? I just don't.
That's actually like, that's a good question. I honestly don't know if I'll ever like want to touch this card unless like I have a huge Goblins theme in, you know, like a tribal cube or like maybe a modern cube. But like even then,
you know what though?
It's not like
Goblin Chieftain gives goblins haste.
That's true.
So if you can get like one of those cards off of it, I think there are a couple others.
All right, Muxus, you're not like super appealing.
Muxus.
Not Maxis.
Did I say Maxis? Yeah, Muxus, Goblin Grandee. That's way better. Sounds like muck.
Muck.
Yep. So this card, Goblin Tribal, if you've got that, it's pretty cool. But other than that, no. Like, don't put this in a Commander Cube either if you think you're going to run Goblin Tribal. We tried it. It's actually extremely powerful, but you have to get the right cards for it. And this guy, top 6 cards is not enough in a Commander deck.
Plus, once you get there, like that, the play pattern is just like super linear, and it's just not fun.
It's literally Krenko Mob Boss plus Pashilic Mons and sacrificing all the goblins that you make. That's literally the only thing that happens.
Yeah, if you really feel the need to play this outside of a tribal cube, you know, maybe make your modern cube focus on goblins, but just play this in a tribal cube.
Yep.
Trust us. All
right, I think that's it for that card. Let's move on.
We have Bruvak, the Grandiloquent. He is a 3-mana, 2 and a blue for a 1/4 legendary creature, Human Advisor. If an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill twice that many cards instead.
So, first things that I noticed about this card is that it looks like he's wearing the garb of the Persistent Petitioners. You know, like the cone hat, and then like
yeah, he's the leader. He's the big thing to me here is that Wizards actually identifies mill as a keyword now. The card actually says mill if an opponent would mill 1 or more cards. So that's pretty cool that we have mill as an actual ability, rather to, you know, just saying put the top card of your library in your graveyard.
Yeah, and what's actually funny is that mill is only called mill in reference to another magic card. So they made an ability that is just a reference to another magic card, because mill is originally coined from the card Millstone, which was like the OG mill your opponent out card, and so that's why it was called mill, except from that one card. So it's funny that they created a keyword mill instead of which is in relation to another magic card. It's just weird, you know? It's sort of like Inception level weirdness going on.
That is weird to me, but like, I know mill for one thing. It's just mill. It's just like dumping your graveyard.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
your
what I'm saying is
library
like the name of the that does not exist in the rest of Magic. There's no other point. It is the keyword is based on a colloquialism created from another Magic card. That's absolutely bad. Millstone is a crappy card. That card is terrible.
Yeah, don't play it in any cubes.
If you play Millstone, I will come to your house and read you this long list of that this guy's got.
Anyways,
and you'll just die from boredom.
The real power of this dude is like basically, I imagine just playing Traumatize and then just milling my opponent out completely.
Yeah.
Other than that, he's kind of just like, he's really linear to me. He doesn't excite me very much. I don't know if he's going to be going, like, he's a legendary creature, so maybe if your commander cube has a lot of mill in it, he would be kind of good, but Travis, I don't think we're putting this in our commander cube.
Yeah, and I think what really holds this guy back is the fact that it says if an opponent would mill one more cards. If it just said if a player, then we have some things going on here, because you could put him with something like Sidisi, Brood Tyrant, or, you know, as a commander of like a Jace, Wielder of Mysteries deck, sort of Lab Maniac sort of thing going on, Self-Mill, and stuff like that, but it says only an opponent. So that makes it a lot worse and a lot more linear, and therefore, in a commander cube, it has less directions to go. It can only go in the direction of milling your opponent. It can't go in the Self-Mill or mill the opponent / graveyard sort of deal going on there. So
basically what we're saying is just don't play it in cube.
Yeah.
It's a cool card, but I mean, it's really linear, guys.
It just for Commander Cube, we've tried playing mill, it doesn't work, and this one card is not going to fix that. What you need is a lot of really good repeatable mill effects that also have other abilities that can allow them to be played in other strategies, because otherwise it's just not good. So include this in any cube where you really want mill to be a thing, but other than that, guys, it's just no. Not impressed.
On to the next one, which is way more interesting.
Yes, this card is Witch of the Moors, 3 and 2 black for a 4/4 creature human warlock. It has Death Touch, and at the beginning of your end step, if you gain life this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature, and you return up to one target creature card from your graveyard to your hand.
It's like Sword of Light Shadow, but without the life gain. Like you
Yeah,
have to gain
well, the life gain is replaced by killing your opponent's creatures, which is a trade I would take.
That's like pretty impressive for.
Oh, this card with Sword of Light Shadow, actually.
And like
Gross.
this.
Oh my gosh, dude!
This in Allura.
Look how many hands she has, dude.
She
1,
can
2, 3,
wield
4, 5,
all the
6.
swords.
She has 8 hands. She can wield literally every sword. There are only 6 that are made, and she can have Sword of the Meek, and then Sword of like Vengeance or something, or a Myriad sword. Oh my gosh, she can wield all the swords. She is the original sword master.
Give the warlock the sword.
Actually, I want to see that happen. I want to see her hands full of swords.
But you can have her hold, or her, I'm assuming.
Yeah, it's probably a she.
It's a witch.
Yeah, it's a witch.
But wait, it's a human warlock, but it's a witch of the Moors.
No,
That's actually
it's gotta be a woman. It's gotta be a woman.
Anyways, you can have her holding all 6 of the swords, and then still 2 hands to hold down Teferi and stab Teferi with every single sword.
Oh yeah,
and it still wouldn't kill him. But...
No, it wouldn't be enough. But you'd take him out for at least a few hours. He'd phase out, you know. All right. So, what's great about this card is that it is the piece. I mean, the piece, the end all of all for a life gain deck. So it's just so much work. So even if you don't have some sort of reoccurable graveyard synergy going on where you just keep killing your creatures, you know, sacrificing them to something, the fact that it makes your opponents kill creatures means that in a life gain deck, it's just worth it. And it doesn't have a specific amount of life that you have to gain. A lot of cards like this will have if you gain 4 life this turn, if you gain 3 life this turn, etc. This just says at the beginning of your end step, if you gained life this turn, each opponent sacrifices a creature. And that is very good. That is extremely good. Just that ability, and then being able to reanimate some random thing. What I like about this is that it can just coincidentally get back your commander. Like if you're playing a Loro and they kill a Loro, you can just get it back to your hand.
Oh, yeah, and that makes like the commander attacks like not feel as bad.
Oh yeah.
So you can just put them in the grave. Oh yeah, that's nice.
This card is amazing. Pick it up for sure.
Like I can see it being played in Commander Cube. If you have like some sort of life gain strategy, it's like that powerful, I think.
Oh no, definitely.
And then
absolutely, it's a shoe-in.
What do you think about like Legacy and Vintage?
No, it can't be played there because it's 5 mana, and that's why. It's 5 mana, it doesn't do anything immediately, and they don't have life gain there. But like in Commander Cube, I think the question is not should it go in if you have life gain. It's is it even good enough to go in if you don't have life gain? Like if you don't have a life gain strategy, which it may be good enough.
Yeah.
Like if you just have a couple things that randomly gain life, a couple random life linkers like Gravebreaker Lamia, plus one of the swords. You got Sword of War and Peace, right. Sword of Light and Shadow, Shadow Spear, and then anything else that just has randomly lifelink. Helioid, Sun Crowned, which gives things lifelink and sort of facilitates itself. That may be enough for this card to be great. All you need to do in a game is to make your opponent sacrifice 2 creatures, and it's done its job. That's all you need to do.
Right, and in our Commander Cube, we don't have like a specific life gain strategy, but we do end up gaining like lots of life in some games.
Yeah, no.
And
then cards like what's his name? The Sky Shark.
Oh, Shabraz.
Shabraz, the
yeah.
Sky Shark, to gain 1 life.
Yeah,
when
that's
you
a
draw
good
card.
point.
Our next card is slightly less interesting, less to talk about here. It is
Emil the Blessed. I think I'm saying that right. It costs 4 mana, 2 and 2 white, and it is a 4/4 legendary creature unicorn. It has an activated ability that costs 3 generic mana to exile another target creature you control and then return it to the battlefield under its control, so blink something. Then it also says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay hybrid Selesnya, so a green or white, and if you do, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. If it's a unicorn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it instead.
So this card, we're going to talk about it very briefly. It's a cool blink enabler. If your cube has blink, it's really expensive in terms of blinking, so I wouldn't put it in anything other than like Commander Cube, maybe a Modern Cube, casual cubes, stuff like that. Not good in Tribal. Unicorns do not do Tribal, I don't think.
No, we're not super high on this card.
Yep, so a blink card and a counters card. Consider it for your Commander Cubes. It is pretty interesting.
Next up, we have Naeth, I think? Naeth of the Dire Hunt. It costs 4 mana for 2 and 2 green for a 3/3 legendary creature human warrior. And it says whenever 1 or more creatures you control fight or become blocked, draw a card. It also says at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may pay 2 and a hybrid Gruul or red or green. If you do, double target creature's power until end of turn. That creature must be blocked this combat if able.
So straight up, I think this is the all-around best card from this bit that we're previewing here, I think.
Yeah.
Because it
so
facilitates itself so well. So well. It's just, it itself is a creature, and what it allows you to draw cards from is not necessarily fighting. Like, it says whenever more creatures you control fight or become blocked, draw a card. You almost don't even care about the whenever one or more creatures you control fight. You just don't care, because becoming blocking is something that is just fundamental to Magic, right? It's just something that always happens in a game of Magic, unless they're 2 Storm players playing against each other, and that never happens because, well, you can't find 2 Storm players in the world these days. They've all been slaughtered. So,
yeah, the second ability on this card fuels the first ability. It makes sure that that creature has to be blocked, and if your opponent has no, creatures out, you just double the power of your creature and potentially swung in for a bunch of damage. And, that's pretty critical.
Yeah, and like, again, even without that ability, even with just the first ability, blocking is a part of Magic. They can not block all day long in order to prevent you from drawing all the cards in the world, but guess what? They're just going to be dead. You cannot not block in a game of Magic playing against a deck like this, unless you just kill all the creatures. So, I think this card is very great. We're definitely putting it in Commander Cube. This is definitely going in the Gruul slot. Gruul aggro is going to be so much better with this card.
Something I just realized, which is actually super cool, if you use the activated ability to double target creature's power until end of turn, it has to be blocked. But, what if that creature has trample?
Oh, yeah.
That, you just double the power, and it's definitely, it's got to be super big.
Elder Gargaroth.
Oh
yeah,
my
that's
God.
a combo wombo.
Yeah. Oof. That is pretty cool. I'm excited for this card in Commander Cube.
Oh, yeah.
Other than that, maybe...
Definitely Modern Cube. I can see this in Modern Cube easy. This will go in Modern Cube.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Legacy or Vintage. 4 mana is a lot to... If it was 3 mana, I'd say, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think the problem with Legacy and Vintage is that they play very rarely just creatures. You very rarely play just value creatures. You either play Mana Dorks to ramp out to your Ugins, or you play blue spells because it's blue, or you play... quick, fast red creatures for aggro that doesn't want this random 4 mana 3/3, or you play Glorybringer in your red-blue control deck in order to control your opponents and close out the game. I don't feel like I don't think this would be as good there.
Right, this card's not like a ramp spell early, and it's not a big finisher.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of in between, but in other cubes, it's going to be so much fun to play.
Yep. All right, that brings us to our next card, which is Sethron, Herloon General. Hello, everybody. It's Seth. Probably better known as Sethron, Herloon General.
Minotaur Warrior!
This is a 5 mana, 3 and 2 red for a 4/4 legendary creature, Minotaur Warrior. He wields Mjolnir, Thor's hammer, and says whenever Sethron, Herloon General, or another non-token Minotaur enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/3 red Minotaur creature token. It also has an activated ability for 2 and a hybrid Rakdos, so black-red. Minotaurs you control get +1/+0 and gain menace and haste until end of turn. So, real quick, just to say it, When this card enters the battlefield, it's a 5 mana 4/4 and enters with another 2/3. So it is a 5 mana 6/7 across 2 bodies. That's amazing stats. That is just amazing. This can block Greater Gargadon and like not survive, of course, because
dude, like I actually
win.
as you read the card, even though like you said it correctly, I actually thought the card was 6 mana. This being 5 mana is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Like a 5 mana 4/4 that makes a 2/3.
And it's whenever another one,
That is insane.
or another non-token creature, non-token Minotaur enters the battlefield under your control. So
You can make tons of Minotaurs off this
Oh, yeah.
thing just for 5 mana, and it's great. The activated ability is awesome too. So like, there's a really cool line of play. I think, like if you played this on turn 5, and then the Neheb
the Worthy,
Neheb the Worthy that gives all your Minotaurs first strike, and then so you
and
play
plus
him.
1/0.
Yeah. So you activate this dude's ability after playing Neheb, and boom, all Minotaurs have first strike, menace, and haste, and +1/+0. That's like,
Yep.
that's game busting.
You're attacking for 5 with Sethron, 2 3/3s, and then another 3/2 first striker. So you're attacking for 9 plus 5, 14 damage on turn 6.
And I think Neheb actually gets like +2/+0 or something like that if you control like some other Minotaur. So like potentially a lot of damage.
I haven't seen Neheb in so long. We should
Yeah.
give him a
Should give
visit.
more attention. But
Yep. Okay,
honestly,
so this guy is definitely the Minotaur tribal leader of the world, which means he's not going to see a lot of play, unfortunately.
yeah, no, I don't really see myself like playing this in Commander Cube even. It's kind of just like